And so I've given a lot of thought, and I'm gonna let you out your contract.
Danity Kane, featuring Aubrey O'Day, Don Richard, Shannon Bex, Aundrea Fimbres, and D Woods, active since 2005. In the mid-2000s, few names in R&B and pop rose faster than Danity Kane. Created on television through Sean Diddy Combs' Making the Band 3 in 2005, the all-female group had everything a label could ask for. Youth, image, personality, and a polished sound blending pop with R&B edge. The lineup was chosen after months of auditions on MTV, marketed as the next great girl group. I'll admit, I never really followed them at the time, as their music wasn't something that caught my attention, but you didn't have to be a fan to see the wave they were about to ride. Their 2006 debut, Danity Kane, opened at #1 on the Billboard 200, selling 234,000 copies in its first week, and later going platinum behind the top 10 singles Showstopper. 2 years later, their sophomore album, Welcome to the Dollhouse, repeated the fortune, also debuting at #1 and producing the platinum single Damaged. With that, they became the first female group in Billboard history to have their first 2 albums debut at #1. On paper, Danity Kane looked like the next dynasty in women's music, poised to fill the gap left behind by Destiny's Child's breakup and lead a new wave of pop collectives. But sometimes the way a group is built makes you doubt how long they can last. Being formed in front of the cameras meant every conflict was magnified and every creative decision tied back to Diddy, whose role blurred between making music and making TV. Behind the scenes, tensions grew over favoritism, image control, and direction. By the time MTV aired the finale of Making the Band 4 in 2008, it was clear the experiment was falling apart. Diddy dismissed Aubrey O'Day and D Woods on live television, and within months the group dissolved, despite being at the height of success. Danity Kane's story didn't end there. They reunited in 2013 without D Woods, though Aundrea left soon after. Their comeback album, DK3, reached #44 on the Billboard 200, but was overshadowed by infighting and even a physical altercation. Later, tours under the DK3 name kept them active, but the spark was gone. To me, their rise and fall feels less like a tragedy and more like proof that fame manufactured this quickly rarely grows roots. What happened? Salute to K Carter on IG for this request. It's your boy JC, StuntedGrowthMusic. Let's get it. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. Danity Kane is a pop and R&B girl group formed in New York City in 2005 on MTV's Making the Band 3. The show, created and overseen by Sean Diddy Combs, put hundreds of aspiring singers through weeks of auditions, rehearsals, and televised drama until the final 5, Aubrey O'Day, Don Richard, Shannon Bex, Aundrea Fimbres, and D Woods, were chosen. What set them apart early was the mix of talent and personality, each member bringing a different look and feel that gave the group marketability. Still, even watching from the outside, you could sense they were being crafted more as a product than a team. Their first real test came in 2006 with the release of their self-titled debut album, which entered Billboard at #1 and went platinum. By their sophomore release in 2008, they had firmly established themselves as a group with much more potential than any group Diddy has put together in that space before. Stunt #1, manufactured from the start. Danity Kane's biggest strength and weakness was that they were built for television. Their origin on MTV's Making the Band 3 made them the first girl group most fans ever saw assembled piece by piece on camera. Every audition, rehearsal, and disagreement was broadcast for entertainment, which created instant visibility, but left the impression that the group was more of a TV product than a collective finding its voice. Behind the scenes, they rehearsed, recorded, and worked like any other group, but the cameras ensured their public identity was inseparable from the show. That meant when the music finally arrived, audiences already carried expectations shaped by TV drama rather than artistry. Their 2006 debut album still soared to #1 on the Billboard 200 and eventually went platinum, showing the formula worked commercially. But from the start, their growth as a group was boxed in by how they were presented to the world. Diddy's role made that box even smaller. He wasn't just their label head, he was judge, mentor, and sometimes critic of their image, sound, and even personal choices. Aubrey O'Day, cast as the outspoken member, became the face of resistance to his control, and while that fueled storylines, it weakened the group's unity. Other members like Don Richard and Shannon Bex were talented in their own right, but often overshadowed by the narrative of Aubrey versus Diddy. From my perspective, this was a setup destined to limit how far they could go. When a group is introduced under bright lights as finished, there's no room to stumble, rebuild, or redefine. Danity Kane had hits, but they never had the freedom to grow into their own identity. Instead, they were locked into the story MTV created for them, and once that story shifted, the music wasn't strong enough to carry them. Stunt number 2, Diddy's mismanagement and control. When Danity Kane signed with Bad Boy Records, they gained the kind of backing most artists only dream of. Sean "Diddy" Combs wasn't just a label boss, he was a global mogul with credibility, connections, and a proven record of creating stars. Not to mention, this very formula specifically he's already had success with. On the surface, it looked like the perfect fit. But what played out behind the scenes and more importantly in front of the cameras showed how his management style could do as much harm as good. Diddy's presence loomed over every decision. He dictated their image, their sound, and how they carried themselves, often choosing confrontation over encouragement. On Making the Band, he openly critiqued members about their appearance, weight, or commitment, framing the group as projects to be fixed rather than artists to be developed. That constant public criticism may have made good television, but it weakened trust and chipped away at the group's identity. Still, Danity Kane delivered. Their second album, Welcome to the Dollhouse in 2008, debuted at #1 on Billboard, selling over 236,000 copies in the first week. With it, they became the first female group in Billboard history to open at #1 with both their first and second albums. But even that milestone couldn't mask the cracks forming underneath. By late 2008, during a filmed segment of Making the Band 4, Diddy announced that Aubrey O'Day and D Woods were no longer part of the group. Technically, the remaining members were still under contract, but the announcement played like a public execution, and for fans, it was the beginning of the end. From my perspective, that moment captured the irony perfectly. The man who gave them the platform also pulled the rug from under them. Their music said success, but their management said otherwise. Stunt number 3, no real front woman. Most great groups eventually center around one undeniable star. It doesn't always have to be official, but audiences know it. The face of the brand, the member who stands out when casual listeners think of the group. Danity Kane never had that anchor, and it hurt them when conflicts and uncertainty came. For a while, Aubrey O'Day filled that role. She was unspoken, charismatic, and the most willing to embrace the spotlight, making her the de facto front woman in the group's peak years. But her confrontational relationship with Diddy and his criticism of her image and behavior fractured that status. Instead of being allowed to lead, she was painted as a problem, and her eventual firing ended any chance she had of solidifying that position. Don Richard had the vocal chops and later proved her artistry as a solo act, but during Danity Kane's run, she stayed more reserved. Shannon Bex provided professionalism and dance leadership, but didn't project herself as the group's voice. Aundrea delivered consistently in harmonies and vocals, yet was rarely promoted as a focal point. D Woods had charisma and confidence, but the label never positioned her front and center either. The result was a group of 5 strong singers sharing a spotlight that needed one clear leader to guide it. Without that centerpiece, interviews often came off unfocused, branding lacked cohesion, and when internal fractures appeared, there was no single figure strong enough to keep the group together. Fans loved the music, but they didn't have one person to rally behind once the hits slowed. Looking back, that missing leadership made Danity Kane easier to divide, easier to replace, and ultimately easier for the industry to move on from once reality TV stopped carrying them. All in all, Danity Kane's story shows how quickly a group can rise when the machine is behind them, and how just as quickly that same machine can strip it all away. In only a few years, they achieved what most groups never touch: 2 consecutive #1 albums, platinum plaques, and a dedicated fan base that watched their every struggle play out on national television. But their origin as a manufactured group Diddy's heavy-handed control and the absence of a lasting front woman left them without the foundation to survive once the novelty wore off. What could have been a decade of dominance instead unraveled into a cycle of breakups, short-lived reunions, creative disputes, missed opportunities, and constant what-ifs. Today, they're remembered less for sustained artistry and more for the drama that defined the rise and fall. For Danity Kane, the spotlight provided opportunity, recognition, and fame, but in the end, it also took away the chance to truly grow. Salute, much respect, but for these reasons, their growth was stunning. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.